He is, and he's chronicled this entire series of readings. He was born in a hospital. He was born in a hospital, not far from the park on Federal Hill, and he was raised in Locust Point. In his salad days, he was an amateur soccer player and a longshoreman. He is an attorney, a professional actor. He was in John Waters' Pecker.
Wait, that's not it.
He's
That's not in there. No.
okay, he wasn't in John Waters' Pecker. He didn't have anything to do with John Waters' Pecker. I'm sure there's a lot more we can say about him, but if you want to know about it, read the website, because suddenly I've screwed this up. But it's anyway, Bill is a very interesting person. I think most of us understand that he's done a lot to keep the Baltimore art scene together. He's taken photographs of everywhere. We owe our sense of community to Bill, and we also owe him a chance to tell us what he thinks. So,
Okay, thank you, John. I think my piece is about a guy named Harry Agro, who he was a World War II guy, and I met him down at the Stonewall Democratic Club years ago. This is a club in South Baltimore near the Cross Street Market. And after the meetings, we would have a beer, and he would tell what happened to him in World War II. And I thought, it was very interesting stories. And then as the fates would have it, I ended up at the city paper as a writer after I left the city solicitor's office. So I said to myself, I got to get a hold of Harry because he has a story to tell. And it was I think it's a compelling narrative. And it was first published in the city paper back in 1984. And since then I put it online, and I mentioned to somebody, Patrick, how the internet came along, and all these ships that were involved, the places where he was confined and all. That's all online now. It can be fully documented. Here's Harry's story. On February the 3rd, 1943, the Baltimore News Post ran a photograph and a short paragraph of the U.S. Navy Seaman First Class Harry Agro of 706 West Barry Street, Baltimore, Maryland. The concise notice simply said that the son of John Agro was missing in action. No other information was permitted to be given out at the time. It would take almost another 3 years for the full story to become known. It begins on April the 20th, 1942 at the main post office down here at Calvert and Fayette Street in downtown Baltimore. In the wave of patriotic fervor which followed the Japanese sneak attack on Pearl Harbor on December the 7th, 1941, Agro decided to do his part in the country's defense. He enlisted in the U.S. Navy, one of 8 children of immigrant Sicilian parents. Agro was then a husky, hardy, 200-pound guy, built on a solid 6-foot frame. At that time, he was working making piston rings in a plant in southwest Baltimore. He was already geared up to see some action. Quote, I took my basic training at Newport, Rhode Island, and had my gunnery training at New Creek, Virginia, Agro explained, while sitting in the comfortable living room in his home in Baltimore Highlands, just south of Baltimore City. I was then assigned as a gunnery mate in the Merchant Marine on a cargo ship, the SS Paul Lukenbach. It was a Liberty ship, that's what they were called back then, and it carried a cargo valued at $8 million of 18 tanks, 10 B-25 planes, and other machinery and military wares bound for the Soviet Union. Well, the cargo was bound for the Soviet Union, but the ship was going to go up into the Indian Ocean and head up into the Arabian Peninsula to Iran. The cargo was then going to be discharged there and then carried by trucks and trains to the Soviet Union, who was our ally in World War II. It sailed from Brooklyn Navy Yard in New York Harbor and met up in the North Atlantic with a convoy of close to 300 ships. In the middle of the North Atlantic, the Luckenbach left the convoy and continued its journey alone, heading south around the Cape of Good Hope off of Africa's southern coast and into the Indian Ocean. It was September the 22nd, 1942, just as night was starting to fall, Agro recalled. I was in the galley helping one of the cooks, a black man named Muscles, with the dishes when the first torpedo struck. Muscles and I quickly ran to the back of the ship to attend the gun that was in the aft part. Just then, 2 more torpedoes hit their mark, and the ship began to lisp badly. As they ran forward, I got stuck in the ship's rigging, but Muscles pulled me out, and we both got over to the side to one of the ship's lifeboats. All 59 crew members on the Luckenbach made it into the lifeboats. The educated speculation was that the ship was hit by torpedoes from a German submarine, since the Indian Ocean was in Third Reich's sphere of operation during the war. Now that turned out not to be true. It was actually a Japanese submarine that sunk the ship. After 26 days in a lifeboat with 14 other men, traveling hundreds of miles, being stalked by sharks, living off of ship's rations and rainwater, surviving a 2-day storm that almost sank their craft, Agro and his mates reached the Indian port city of Malabar. He credits the instructions given by the Luckenbach captain to steer northeast no matter what, as Agro recalled, for his survival. After a short respite in India, Agro was transferred to what was then the island of Ceylon, now Sri Lanka, to take the position of a gunnery mate. That's the same position he had on the other freighter, on another American cargo vessel, the SS Slovakia, which was carrying a full cargo of jute. It was headed for the U.S. Agro, it appeared, was finally headed home. Only 9 days out of Ceylon, however, the Slovakia was spotted by a German raider vessel, the HK Mikkel, camouflaged as a cargo vessel. The Mikkel, I should say, was actually a fierce man of war, heavily armed with torpedoes, artillery, and machine guns, and they even had a small plane for scouting purposes. On November the 29th, the Mikkel sank the Slovakia in less than 15 minutes of combat. Not one trace of that ship remained. Wow. At the time, it was located 400 miles northwest of the island of Madagascar. Only 19 of the 62 crew members survived. All the men carked below deck when the ship was first attacked died. By a stroke of sheer luck, Agro happened to be on deck when the first bomb hit. Despite the serious wounds to his head and leg, he managed to get off the dying ship, and after spending the night in the water, was picked up the next day by the German Mikkel. The Germans treated us good, right as sailors. They never beat us, Agro noted. We were on that ship for 3 months. It also sank a Greek and British freighter, so that there were about 85 survivors from the 3 vessels on the Mikkel. The Germans ended up taking us to Singapore and then turning us over to the Japanese. Now this is where the Dante's hell part of Agro's journey really begins. It was during the 2 years and 9 months of Japanese confinement as a prisoner of war that Agro's fortunes took a turn for the worse. We were herded like cattle on board a Japanese ship. It must have been 400 prisoners, all nationalities. It seemed like it took us forever to reach their northernmost island of Hokkaido, where the prison camp town of Hokkaido was located. Agro said in the camp he was forced to work 18 hours a day for 14 straight days with only 1 day off. He labored most of the time loading coal ships and barges, when where he was personally required to load tons of coal each day, carrying 90 kilos on 2 baskets, balanced on a pole, walking up a plank and onto the vessel. He also worked in the mines and once was forced to help build an airfield. They would beat you for nothing, for no reason at all. They would slap you with their fist, hit you with a stick, even with their rifle butt. Once they beat me over the head with a shovel, Agro recalled. You always had to bow to them. And if you were slow getting up from your straw mat where you slept at night in the barracks, they would hit you. The food was never enough. It was mainly rice, fish heads, fish bones, and sometimes soup made out of seaweed. The last 5 months of the war, however, things started to get better. We got some Red Cross parcels, and that really saved us, Agro said. At the time the war ended, he was weighing 125 pounds. What was also really bad was that we never got any news from the outside world, not all the time we were there. He had it, and he said that he added that the biggest problem was every 14 days they would change the guards, bring in a new set of guards who would just start beating us up all over again. They once caught an Englishman stealing some food, Agro continued, and they stood the poor man up outside against a pole from 5 a.m. to 5 p.m. in the snow for 2 weeks until he died. They then put his body in a barrel and took him up the hill where they cremated him and brought his remains back in a jug. Of the 900 prisoners in that camp, I think only 390 ever came home. The rest went up that hill in a barrel. The Japs always told us the war was going to last 50 or 100 years. Towards the end of the war, however, things started to change in the camp. They stopped beating us. We wondered why. On Agro's birthday, August the 6th, 1945, the U.S. dropped an atomic bomb on the city of Hiroshima. It killed 92,000 people. On August the 9th, 1945, another atomic bomb was dropped on the city of Nagasaki, where 40,000 people were killed and an equal number injured. The devastation from both of these blasts was so widespread that to this day, the U.S. government has never relinquished the official films of the fiery Holocaust. Japan surrendered on August the 14th, 1945. Harry had survived. Asked how he was able to withstand the torturous ordeal of the prison camp, Agro underscored his will to live. He said, "You always had it in your mind that you would never let those people bury you there. That is why I kept going. I was also young, and that helped me. The older guys had a more difficult time. But once you get something in your head that you want to live, no matter how bad the conditions, I wanted to get back home, and that kept me going." Now here's the postscript. Harry died peacefully in his home in Baltimore Highlands at the age of 81 in 2006. The Baltimore Sun paid tribute to him in a very wonderful obituary, if you can call an obituary wonderful, by Fred Rasmussen. And Fred asked me for my assessment of Agro. I told him he had an unconquerable spirit, and he was a real hero.